We will now look at cubic polynomials, how to factorize them. And just before we start, let me remind you how to do mathematics. So when you look at the example, just make sure that you understand all the steps. And then when you see the pause button, pause the video and do it on your own. And before pressing play again and then watching the answers. And then also to improve, you're going to have to mark your answers and then see where you make your mistakes in order to do better the next time you do it. Okay, so in this video we have two sections. The first one is just to look at a cubic polynomial and how to factorize it, and the second one is how to solve equations involving cubic polynomials. Now, when we look at factorizing cubic polynomials, there are three methods. So the first method is called the matrix method. Then we can do it using inspection, and then finally using the long division. Now with the examples and also the questions, I'm going through all three of these methods, and at the end of the day you choose which method you use, and then you can stick to that. And when you have questions in your final paper, you decide which method you want to use to do the factorization with. Okay, now in example 51 it says factorize the cubic expression below, and we are going to start with the matrix method. Now in all three of the methods, one thing is constant. Let's just write this down. So we have x cubed plus 2x squared minus 5x minus 6. The first thing you have to do for all of them is to find the x value that will give you that will make this expression 0. Okay, now we are going to look at y later when we do the factor theorem, but for now it's sufficient to know if you find the x value that makes it 0, you found your first factor. Okay, so we take out our calculator and we are going to type in. Now also another thing is when you look for the x value, I would recommend that you start with plus or minus 1, and then if plus 1 and minus 1 don't work, you go on to say plus or minus 2, and then you try plus and minus 3, just so that you don't jump around, but that you have some type of structure, that you know if you've done one, it's not going to happen. Okay, so this is then, now what I'm doing is typing it into the calculator exactly like I see it there, but with 1 to see if 1 is going to give me 0. So type in 1 everywhere that I see an x. I'm just going to type in 1, and yeah, it's quite a tedious task. This is plus, so that's squared, minus 5, so this is 1, and then minus 6. Okay, so that gives me minus 8, so 1 doesn't work. So now don't erase everything, just go back and maybe replace it with minus 1, or just type in a minus there. Okay, 0, there we go. So minus 1, if I substitute in minus 1, it means that I will get 0, which means that x plus 1 will be a factor, is a factor. Because remember, if you say x plus 1 equals to 0, and you solve for x, then you get x equals to minus 1. So that's why x plus 1 with the opposite sign is the factor. Okay, now with the matrix method, the first thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw these bars or table, and I have, for a cubic polynomial we always draw 4 rows so that we can fill in the coefficients of the terms. And even if one of the coefficients, let's say you had something like just x cubed minus 5x minus 6, this just means that this is a 0. Okay, so coefficient of x cubed comes in here, coefficient of x squared there, coefficient of x, and the constant always goes there. So as I said, if one of those terms aren't there, it just means it's like a 0 that you will fill in here. So that is 1, so 1, 2, minus 5, and minus 6. Okay, your x value goes here, minus 1. Okay, then we start with 0 and we want to end with 0. Okay, and the rule of this table is you add down and you multiply across. So that's quite easy to remember, because if we go down, we add. If we go across, we multiply. Alright, so 1 plus 0 is 1. And then minus 1 times by 1 is going to be minus 1. So basically I'm adding down and then taking the answer and multiplying it with my minus 1, or the x value that will give me 0. Okay, and then 2 minus 1 is 1. Minus 1 times 1 is minus 1. Minus 5 plus minus 1 is negative 6. And then minus 1 times by minus 6 gives me positive 6. Alright, and then I add down, and yes, I get 0. So at the end, this must add up to 0, then you know you have done it correctly. Okay, so what happens now is these numbers in here, they become your new coefficients for x squared, x, and the constant. So if I write down, I start by writing my factor, x plus 1, and then this is now my other factor, 1x squared, so x squared, plus 1x, so plus x, minus 6, okay? And then you are just left to factorize this using like a grade 9 factorization method. Factors of 6, 1 times 6, 2 and 3. To get plus 1, I'm going to say plus 3 minus 2. So this is going to be x plus 1, and then x minus 2, and x plus 3. Alright, and then we are done with that. Okay, now let's look at exactly the same sum, but now we're going to do it with inspection. Now, first of all, we saw, I'm not going to go through the entire thing again, but we saw when we substituted in minus 1, we get 0. So when you start from scratch, you have to substitute in your values and see what will give you 0. So we saw that x plus 1 is a factor. You can just write that down, is a factor. Okay, then it's important to write down your first expression. So this is going to be x to the power 3 plus 2x squared minus 5x minus 6 equals 2. Okay, now first thing, we write our factor, x plus 1, and then to get this, now one thing you know is this is going to be 3 terms, and then to get the first term, you say this first term of your expression divided by the first term of your factor. This will give you x squared, because if I say x cubed, which is that first term, divided by x, I just get x squared. Alright, and then you write down plus kx, because we don't know what the middle term is yet. We just know that it is a term that contains x, and then the last one will be a constant. So to get that, we say minus 6 divided, so now we take the last term of our expression divided by the last term of our factor, and this gives us minus 6. Okay, now we are left with getting that k value. So what we're going to do now is, remember when you multiply, or when you FOIL, or when you multiply our two brackets, you take this one, you multiply it with that, then that, then that, and at the end of the day, you get some like terms, and you add up the like terms, and you end up with this. Now, we are going to look at the factors, or the multiplication, which will end up to x squared. So if I say these two, that's going to be 1 times x squared, will give me an x squared term, and x times by kx will also give me an x squared term. So in general, you can always use these two in the middle, and then these two, this one and the middle one. That's standard for the inspection. So if I say 1 times x squared, that gives me x squared, plus x times kx squared, that gives me kx squared, equals to, so this will be equal to 2x squared, right? And now we can use this equation to solve for x. I'm going to take the one that does not have x to the other side. So if kx squared equals to 2x squared minus x squared, and we end up with kx squared equals to x squared. So, or 1x squared. 2 minus 1 is 1. Then we can see, okay, k will then be equal to 1. So therefore k is equal to 1. And now we can substitute that back in. So we have x plus 1, x squared plus 1x, or just x, minus 6. And we are now back with the previous one. Now factorizing this is quite simple. X plus 1, x plus 3, and x minus 2. And that is our factors. Then for the last example, this is long division, and it's rightly named. It's definitely long, and it's definitely the longest method, which I would not advise you to do, but I'm going to do it anyway. So we are going back to primary school, and the same rules apply as normal long division. We are now just going to do it with polynomials. Okay. Here we saw that our factor was x plus 1. Yeah, x plus 1. All right. So remember, with long division, what was first? It's you divide, then you multiply, then you minus, and then you bring down. Okay. So in this case, when we divide, you only focus on the first term. So the first term, so you divide it with x to the power 3 divided by x gives me x squared. Okay. Now I multiply. So x to the power of 2 times by x. But now when I multiply, I have to multiply this one with both of these terms. So x squared times by x gives me x cubed. X squared times by 1 is 1x squared. Okay, then we multiply. Now we subtract. So put it in brackets, because you need to remember that this minus needs to go to both of these terms. So basically the sign is just going to change. When you subtract, this is 0. Then 2 minus 1 is 1. So that's just x squared. Okay, subtract it. Now we bring down. So we bring down the minus 5. And we start all over again. So x goes in x squared, x times plus x. Then x times by x is x squared. X times by 1 is x. And then this was a 5x. And then we subtract. Okay. Then this is 0. This becomes minus 6x. And we bring down negative 6. And start again. X goes in negative 6. X negative 6 times. Negative 6 times by x is negative 6x. Negative 6 times by minus 1 is minus 6. We subtract. They are identical, so that's 0. No remainders. All right, so there's our the quotient. So we have x plus 1, and then x squared plus x minus 6. And then factorize that. Trinomial. X plus 3, x minus 2, and we are done. Right, so this is where the questions start. And factorize the following cubic expression below. And we're going to look at our calculator again. We type in the entire thing. So let's start with 1 to the power 3. Then minus 7. So 1 to the power of 2 minus 10, and then 1 plus 16. Okay, so the first one worked. Okay, so 1 is then going to give us 0 when we substitute it in, and that means that x minus 1 is a factor. X minus 1 is a factor. Okay, now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start and do the matrix method, and after this I'm going to do the elimination method, and then after this I'm going to do the long division method. So you probably by now know what method you prefer, so just fast forward to the one that you prefer to see the answer for this. Okay, here goes the matrix method. So there's my bars. All right, so my coefficients are 1, minus 7, minus 10, and 16. Start with 0, end with 0. My x value is 1. Okay, add down. 1 times 0 is 1. 1 times 1 is 1. Add down, minus 6. This is minus 6. And then minus 10 minus 6 is minus 16. 1 times minus 16 is negative 16. So this adds up to 0. And then we have our answer. So this is x minus 1, and that is x squared minus 6x. Remember, this is now our new coefficients. Minus 16 equals to, not equals to 0. We're not on equation, we're just factorizing. Okay, and then factorizing that using trinomial factorization. Factors of 16, 1 times 16, 2 times 8, 4 and 4. So to get negative 6, I'm going to say minus 8 plus 2. All right, so x minus 1, and then x minus 8 and x plus 2. Now just remember that the order of these factors, they don't matter. It's okay to write them. Maybe you found another factor first. Maybe you found x equals to minus 2 first. And then you use that factor as your factor, which is fine. You're still going to have the same answer. Okay, same story. We know now that x minus 1 is a factor. Okay, and we are going to do the elimination method, and we write out x cubed minus 7x squared minus 10x plus 16 equals to, okay, my factor is x minus 1, and then the next factor, so take the first term here divided by the first term here, that gives us x squared, then plus kx, and then last term divided by last term gives me negative 16. Right, now we are multiplying those two together, adding plus those two together, and that should give us that. So minus x squared, this and this, plus kx squared should be equal to minus 7x squared. Okay, then this goes over, so this is kx squared equals to minus 7x squared plus x squared, because this now becomes a plus. Then we have kx squared equals to minus 6x squared, so therefore k will be equal to minus 6, and we put it back in, so we get x minus 1, and then x squared minus 6x minus 16. Okay, so we have x minus 1, and then we have x minus 8 and x plus 2 when we factorize this, and there we have our answer. Right, over here I'm going to use the long division method. So we know that x minus 1 is a factor. X minus 1 is a factor. Right, so we put it in our long division. We write x to the power 3 minus 7x squared minus 10x plus 16, and then we have x minus 1 over here. Okay, so x to the power 3 divided by x, that gives me x squared. Then x squared times by x gives me x to the power 3. X squared times by minus 1 is minus x squared. Then we subtract. This becomes 0. This becomes a plus. So minus 7 plus 1 gives me minus 6x squared. Bring down the negative 10x. Then x goes into minus 6x squared. So that is minus 6x times that with that is going to be minus 6x squared. Minus 6x times by minus 1 gives me plus 6x. Alright, subtract. That's 0. This becomes minus, so this becomes minus 16x. Bring down the other 16. Okay, x goes into minus 16x minus 16. Minus 16 times x is minus 16. X minus 16 times minus 1 is plus 16. We subtract. They are identical once again, 0. Okay, so I have x minus 1, and then what I've left here, x squared minus 6x minus 16, and then x minus 1, and this factorized x minus 8 and x plus 2. Okay, and that is then our factors. Okay, now we have the second question. So once again, we have to start off by first looking for the x value that will give us a 0. So we can start again by 1, and then we cube that, minus 3, 1 squared, minus 11, 1 plus 6. Okay, that gives us minus 6. That's not going to work, so let's try minus 1. Equals 12, not going to work. Alright, now I'm going to just replace the 1 with a 2, so that just trying to make this as least amount of work as possible. Then I'll take away the minus. So replace this with 2. Yeah, that's 0. Okay, so x plus 2 is then our factor. So x plus 2 is a factor. Right? And we are now just starting with the matrix method. So I'm going to draw those. And my coefficients are 2, minus 3, minus 11, and 6, plus 6. So just be careful with your signs here. We start with 0, we end with 0. Then we have our x value as minus 2. So I'm adding down. 2 plus 0 is 2, multiplying through. Minus 2 times 2 is negative 4, adding down minus 7, multiplying, this gives me positive 14, adding down gives me 3, and multiplying 3 is minus 6. So minus 6 minus 6 is 0, so I know I'm right there. And then this becomes my new factor, so x plus 2, and then 2x squared minus 7x plus 3. Okay, that's my x squared, my x term, and my constant. Factorize this. This is a harder type of factorization. This is where we have to use either the extra large method or grouping method. So 1 times 2 and 1 times 3. So 2 and 1. Okay, although this is grade 10 work, so you should be able to do it quite easily by now. And we want to get minus 7. So 2 times 3 gives me 6, and 1 times 1 gives me 1, and then minus and minus gives me minus 7, so this sign goes there and that sign goes there, and then we have our answer. So this is going to be 2x minus 1, 2x minus 1, and that is x minus 3, x minus 3. Right, and that is then our answer. Okay, now let's do the same thing now with inspection. We know that x plus 2 is a factor. X plus 2 is a factor, right? And we write down our expression 2x cubed minus 3x squared minus 11x plus 6 equals 2. So my factor is x plus 2. Then I know to get the first term, take the first term here divided by the first term here. So that's going to be 2x cubed divided by x leaves me 2x squared, then plus kx, and then plus 6 divided by 2 is 3, so plus 3. Alright, now to get the k term, all I'm going to do is I'm going to say these two multiplied together added to these two multiplied together should give me that one. Right, so we have 4x squared plus kx squared equal to negative 3x squared. Okay, take the 4 over, so kx squared equals to minus 3x squared minus 4x squared. So kx squared equals to minus 7x squared. So k is equal to minus 7. And we put it back in. We have x plus 2, 2x squared minus 7x plus 3. Factorize this. 1 and 2, 3, 1 and 3, 2 and 1, we want to get minus 7. So 2 times 3 is 6, 1 times 1 is 1, minus, 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 minus. So this is going to be x plus 2, then 2x minus 1, and x minus 3. Right, then that is done. Okay, finally, we are on the long division now. So once again, we saw that x plus 2 is a factor, right? Then we put it into our long division. 2x to the power 3 minus 3x squared minus 11x plus 6. All right, then x plus 2. So this divided by x gives me 2x squared. This times this, or 2x squared times by x, gives me 2x cubed again. 2x squared times by 2 is plus 4x squared. Subtract. Remember your brackets. So that becomes 0. This one's sign changes. That becomes minus 7x squared. Its sign changes because we're subtracting. Then bring down the negative 11x. Start again. X goes into minus 7x squared. So that becomes minus 7x. So minus 7x times by x gives me minus 7x squared. Minus 7x times by 2 gives me negative 14x. And then we subtract. Okay, then we get 0 there. And minus 11 plus 14 now gives me plus 3x. Then we bring down the 6 plus 6. Okay, and then we go again. So x goes into 3x 3 times. So plus 3. 3 times x is 3x. And then 3 times 2 is 6. And then we subtract. And then we have 0. Okay, now my factors are x plus 2 and 2x squared minus 7x plus 3. And then factorize this. So we get 1 times 2, 1 times 3. This needs to give negative 7. So 2 and 1. Okay, so to get negative 7, I'm going to say 2 and 3 is 6. 1 and 1 is 1. So minus, 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 minus. My answers then are x plus 2, 2x minus 1, and x minus 3. Yeah, that is then the answers. Okay, so we are now done with factorization. Now let's look at solving for the equations. Now in this, for the equations part, I am using the same examples, except I'm putting them in the equation form. So I am not going through all the factorization again. I'm just going to add on what you do when it is an equation. Right. So for example, here is the first example we had, and it says solve for x. Now here you have to, if you get this as it is in a exam, you have to go through all the steps that we just gone through with the factorization, and you choose whether you use the matrix method or the long division or whatever method you prefer. But then you end up with x minus 2, x plus 3, and x plus 1. Alright? And that then equal to 0. Now here we have 3 factors, and we are just solving for x, so we just say x minus 2 equals to 0, or x plus 3 equals to 0, or x plus 1 equals to 0. And then we can just say x is equal to 2, or x is equal to minus 3, or x is equal to minus 1. So like solving for x and factorizing, the hardest part, the biggest part is basically to factorize. After you factorized, the solving for x is very, very straightforward. Okay, so I would recommend, if you didn't get the factorization right in the factorization part, that you start like redoing it, maybe try it again. Otherwise, if you think you're fine with factorization, yeah, solving for x is really simple. Okay, so if you do factorize this, it goes to Then just rewrite this, minus 10x plus 16 equals to 0. So if we factorize that, it goes to x minus 1, x minus 8, and x plus 2 equal to 0. Then you can say x minus 1 equals to 0, or x minus 8 equals to 0, or x plus 2. You can even like skip this step really and just say, okay, x would be equal to 1, or x will be equal to 8, or x will be equal to minus 2. And that would be your answers. Okay, final one. When we solved for this, 2x cubed minus 3x squared minus 11x plus 6 equals to 0. Okay, factorizing that gives us x plus 2, then 2x minus 1, and then x minus 3. Right, so that would say x plus 2 is equal to 0, or 2x minus 1 equals to 0, or x minus 3 equals to 0. So then we can say x is equal to minus 2, or x is equal to a half, or x is equal to 3. Okay, and that means we are done.